The Black Knife Assassins are notorious in Elden Ring's lore for their participation in the Night of the Black Knives, where they murdered Godwyn the Golden by ganking him with their signature weapon, the Black Knife. And I'm curious to see how this small dagger could operate in the hands of the player, considering the fact that we don't have access to the same kung fu that the NPCs use. But hit that like button and let me give it to you bite size. So starting off with our armor, the Black Knife set, this will give us weak lightning resistance, but pretty decent defense in other areas, considering we're supposed to be this nimble assassin. And our poise of 40 is what I expected, but I don't think we'll need to rely on poise, considering we'll be acting stealthy. I'll also note that the chest piece has the ability to muffle our footsteps when unaltered. Our weapon is the Black Knife, which is a faith and dexterity scaling dagger that comes with the weapon art Blade of Death. This will unleash a black and red slash towards enemies, dealing damage, reducing their maximum HP by 10% for 15 seconds, and dealing damage over time for 5 seconds. I've made the decision to include the talismans that drop from the Black Knives to make things a bit more interesting, which will mean using the Concealing Veil and the Assassin's Crimson and Circulean Dagger. The dagger talismans will restore our FP by 15 or our HP by 10% plus 85 every time we perform a critical hit, while the Concealing Veil will turn us invisible when crouching about 5 medium rolls away from opponents, which isn't compatible with some other talismans like the Creeper's Vial, and is a far cry from the version used by the actual Black Knife Assassins. And lastly, these are my stats on the level 137 Prophet, aiming for a split of Dexterity and Faith. Now taking this out for a spin, in PvE you won't have any issues killing bosses, considering we do percentage based damage with Blade of Death, but due to our weapon's short length, you will need to get close and personal to actually attack. I didn't notice any benefit from the Concealing Veil during these boss fights, but of course the Assassin's Crimson and Circulean Dagger will work, providing you can land a critical strike on your opponent. And in PvP, there's this hilarious thing you can do with Concealing Veil, where you can essentially make yourself invisible, causing your opponents to run around the arena to find you before ambushing them with Blade of Death. But other than that, the weapon art does brilliant damage on a direct hit, and even if it doesn't land, it can still inflict the damage over time and the health reduction for extremely jank hitboxes. The weapon itself does pretty good damage if you can attack fast enough to land strikes, and I wasn't able to land a critical as backstabbing people in the arena is extremely difficult and situational, and we don't have any options for parrying. But there are two big flaws with our build. The first is that against big tanky opponents, we will struggle due to the fact that our weapon has the range of a butter knife, and against super aggressive enemies, you may struggle to outdamage them when trading, requiring you to have to utilize ambushes and other tactics like selective strikes to gain the upper hand. So let's make some adjustments. Let's add in another Black Knife so we can power stance them for higher damage and attack speed, and I'll also throw in the Godslayer seal, which will boost the power of our Godslaying incantations by 10%, and this can stack with a second one if you wanted to run a more spellcaster focused build. For our incantations, I'll add in Darkness just because it looks cool, but this can reset an enemy's aggro and blind them for several seconds, although this won't work on bosses. Then I'll add in Scouring Black Flame and Black Flame Ritual for our high damaging Destined Death incantations, which will be useful for keeping enemies at bay or catching them at medium distance. And lastly, I'll throw in Black Blade, which will reduce the enemy's maximum HP by 10% for 15 seconds, alongside sapping their health for 2 seconds, and this stacks with either Destined Death or Blade of Death. For our talismans, let's keep the Concealing Veil by adding the Crimson Amber Medallion +2 so we can save some points on Vigor while hitting the soft cap, and I'll throw in the Radagon's Icon for maximum cast speed and the good old Shard of Alexander with modified stats on the level 137 Prophet. And I think this gives us some much needed variety while keeping to the build style and theme. Having two daggers will allow us to chain attacks and stun enemies for brilliant damage, while the Destined Death incantations provide us with some safety against aggressive enemies and can even stagger them for damage. Black Blade can be followed up with a second strike, and despite being difficult to land, it looks amazing and of course deals great damage. Darkness isn't all that useful, as you can still see the glow of weapon arts within the smoke, but I find it aesthetically pleasing and a nice way to scare opponents. But to wrap things up, I'll leave you with some arena battles and the boss fight so you can see the build in its entirety. But of course, leave your comments below and subscribe. This is Bite Sized Otaku, and I hope you enjoyed.